So it's great to be here with you, Jerry, to talk about the Star-Spangled Banner and its upcoming anniversary. And I know in many ways it has a reputation as a pretty difficult song. Have you found, as you know, we've explored the history of the Star-Spangled Banner, that it's changed your relationship to the song?
What has changed is to realize how many versions of the Star-Spangled Banner there are. When I was in high school, I had a very strong-willed history teacher who made us memorize all 4 verses of the Star-Spangled Banner. And at any point throughout the week, she could say, "Jerry, would you stand and say verse 3 of the Star-Spangled Banner?" So I knew that there were more verses than one. But it was mostly associated with fear because of my relationship with her, which was fine, although it was worrisome. But now to encounter so many different keys, so many different rhythmic associations with that tune, possibilities for solo and choral performance, yeah, it has changed my relationship. It's opened my eyes to lots of possibilities and also to understand some of the challenges of encountering those various versions.
I think for me, one of the things that the different versions highlights is like how important tempo choice is.
Sure. Because if you choose the same tempo and you do several different versions, it can get a little tedious. What particularly helped was your explanation, Mark, of where it came from, the situation that it was perhaps sung for the first time, or who sang it, maybe how trained they were or not trained they were, how forceful their revolutionary spirit might have been at that moment, or not, made then some of the tempo choices logical. Also, if it's in 6/8, it's going to feel different than if it's in 4/4 or 3/4. I mean, there just tends to be more of movement or more sturdiness, or depending on what the setting really is.
Now it has a reputation as being a very hard song to sing, I think because of the range. Do you find with a chorus that sort of fixes that problem because you have different voices with different strengths, or what do you do to make the overall sound as effective as possible?
When everybody sings in unison, depending on the key, it can be a little high near the end. I think that's an ill-earned reputation, because if you start it low enough, anybody can sing the ending. It also, people need to be brave to sing the ending. They just need to go for it and sing it. At Michigan football games, when I sing the Star-Spangled Banner, and one of the only people singing in my neck of the woods of 111,000 people, I find that when people get near the end, and I always listen very carefully, when people get to the end, they always go down an octave, and they sing that final section down an octave. Well, sure, why not? Go for it. If it was in a different key, maybe they wouldn't have to. But you do have to be brave and sing it with courage and energy, and it'll be fine. Certainly in an SATB version, the sopranos are happy to sing those high notes at the end.
I think you're absolutely right that the choice of the melody, it's purposeful, because it does take a kind of heroism,
Absolutely.
or a kind of energy and passion to make that tune work. And Francis Scott Key chose that tune knowing that the people who would sing it, and his own feeling of having to really put his heart behind the words, as opposed to just sort of being able to drone on. If it were too easy to sing, it wouldn't be very expressive.
It is a jaunty and heroic and a purposeful tune that captures both the energy of the battle and also the triumphal victory that happens in the battle as well. So not only is it battle, but when you get into the other verses, it tends to take a little different tack in terms of the feelings of warmth and reverence for your country.
I've noticed in your performances that you do kind of dramatic pullback in that last couple cadences. Is that something you'd recommend as a way of sort of bringing that sense of drama to the piece?
Sure. It feels natural to me. It feels like we're going someplace, and when we arrive, then there needs to be a sense of resolution at the end and not being in a hurry to get on to the next verse. The ending should feel very cumulative and also as a culmination of what we have done. So, sure, yeah, I think some retardando as we get near the end, absolutely.
So if choral directors and musicians want to feature the Star-Spangled Banner in celebration of the anniversary, or really any time that that's appropriate, in what ways do you think it could be contextualized with other music or programming choices to make it make sense? You know, unfortunately for me, probably in a concert of all the Star-Spangled Banner melodies might be a little tiresome for the audience.
It's not.
Well, it sounds beautiful to me, but I can understand that others might not feel the same.
However, if you did that and juxtaposed different settings, even if you did Star-Spangled Banner, Star-Spangled Banner, Star-Spangled Banner, there is quite a different variation, and you could lots of things come to mind. You could build a concert section, say 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever, starting with an early version, sometimes with the lower leading tone that we are so unused to hearing, 6/8, whatever. An early version, maybe you do verse 1, and then you do a piece or two from that time, maybe, you know, Billings or something from the early 1800s, late 1700s, and you do something that then you do maybe verse 2 in another version, and then another something else from the 19th century, and then verse 3 and something else, and then end, for instance, with what we would consider the traditional Star-Spangled Banner. That could be very interesting. You could also do a series of just performances of the various versions of the Star-Spangled. I wouldn't do all of the verses all at once, but you could do one from one from the other, back to back, with some narration between. Who, why, where, when. I would also vary solo, SATB chorus, TTBB chorus, you know, woman singing, man singing, that sort of thing, accompanied, unaccompanied, piano, forte piano, harpsichord, all of those sort of things to give different color. Could be different spacing around the room, maybe verse 2, and I don't remember which one is more contemplative, maybe comes from a different place, maybe a soloist from the balcony. I mean, you could do all sorts of things to make it very interesting, very communicative.
As part of a choral performance of American music, are there other pieces by American composers that you're particularly fond of, or you think would make an effective sort of statement about, again, in the way that the banner talks about who we are as Americans? Are there other pieces that come to mind with a similar message?
Well, I certainly think of Billings and those other, Chester and those early American tunes that have been both set in the traditional way, maybe the original way, and maybe in a more shape note style singing you could do. I also think of MacDowell later on in the 19th century, which we don't do much MacDowell, but there isn't a lot of patriotic fervor in MacDowell's music. It tends to be more elegant and classical in terms of concert hall type singing. But it could be very interesting to do some of the salon music that would have been in the later 19th century. It would be interesting to juxtapose that with. And maybe even juxtapose it with Copland or something from the 20th century. To give perspective to it. Or maybe you build something around war music, whatever that would be, pieces that were written around 1812 and 1916 and 1942 and you know, even 1970, you know, with Vietnam. It would be interesting to sort of put that in perspective and how the Star-Spangled Banner has inspired people in each of those situations, and maybe even inspired people during times of difficulty, you know, the Depression, the 30s, or Reconstruction, certainly the Civil War, and how that would have, and since this is the anniversary of that as well, there would be some very interesting connections.
That's great. Well, I'll consider that a deal. Let's do a concert.
That's okay, it's a deal.
Thanks a lot for sharing your insights.
Sure.